Hey guys, welcome back to more Reddit HOA stories. How does a legally dead homeowner association manage to hire a demolition crew to destroy a handicapped child's ramp? That is the question I asked myself after coming home to a destroyed front yard. The HOA president claimed it was bylaw enforcement, but I soon found out the shocking truth. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, HOA Karen claims my kid is faking disability and bulldozes our wheelchair ramp. Posted on r/Prorevenge. I did not even know what an HOA even did before we bought this house. They keep the grass short and the Christmas lights tasteful, the realtor said. It is a quiet community, great schools, everyone is friendly. Sure, it was quiet for about 3 weeks. But then we intimately got to know the HOA president next door, and I learned what quiet community means when it is run by a nosy tyrant who lives for power trips and petty wars. But for context, I'm a single parent and my kid is 12. She has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. She can stand for short periods during physical therapy, which is honestly one of her proudest achievements. We finally managed to buy this house after years of renting, and the only non-negotiable item was the ramp. The ramp is her independence. We planned it with the city, pulled permits, got inspections, new concrete pads, handrails, just everything. The contractor handled it all by the book. We were giddy picking paint colors for the handrails, wild Friday night stuff for us. A week after we moved in, we got to know the HOA president next door. I didn't know she was the new president yet. I just knew she had a tight little clipboard with a pen clipped straight like a soldier, and she stood with her shoulders back like the sidewalk had to salute her. She was very detail-oriented and passionate about community standards. By the way, guys, if someone says that, that's a huge red flag already. And I said, cool. She looked past me into my garage like she was checking for contraband recycling bins, and the first time she saw my kid stand up, it was in our driveway during PT. My kid's therapist had her do 20 seconds with the walker, just getting weight through her legs. My kids loved their therapist. They sang dumb exercises together and laughed at TikToks between sets. Anyway, this woman sees my kid stand and something in her face clicked into place. The suspicion smile, you know the one, like she just sniffed out a YouTube conspiracy. She didn't say anything then, she waited, and that is what she did. She watched. I would catch her taking photos of our ramp from the porch, and she would angle her phone low like she was sneaky or something. She took notes on that clipboard like we were a building code exam. She was always out walking the dog when deliveries arrived, and then the letters started. First one, your ramp rails are an unapproved color. It was gray. Gray. I emailed back with the permit packet and the photos and the city's sign-off. She then replied with a PDF of some so-called architectural guidelines that I hadn't even seen that said earth tones only. Gray is an earth tone, right? Rocks are gray. I sent a photo of a boulder. I shouldn't have bothered though. Second letter, your ramp footprint may exceed setback standards. I sent her the property survey and the city stamp again. Then came the third letter, your ramp contributes noise nuisance due to wheels clacking on planks. She started calling the ramp temporary, and she said if we were using a wheelchair sometimes, then they needed to review the necessity of permanent fixtures altering the neighborhood's aesthetic. I told her to talk to the city, but she said the city does not enforce the HOA laws. I said the ADA does not answer to clipboards, but that did not go over well with her. Then came the rumors. I heard from another neighbor that the HOA president, let's call her clipboard lady now, had told the board my kid was faking it. Apparently, she saw my kid stand for a few seconds during therapy and decided that is proof. She told people that we were milking benefits and gaming the system. I cannot even describe what that felt like without cursing for 5 paragraphs. My kid heard some of it. I mean, she is 12. She already knows what it's like for strangers to stare like she's a sideshow. I thought buying a house might give us some peace, but instead we got a neighbor who had the moral range of a traffic cone. And by the way, guys, that is pretty unfair towards traffic cones, I must say. We tried to do everything right. We sent copies of the permits, the inspection sheet, the plans. We attended an HOA meeting, that was a treat by the way, because Clipboard Lady ran it like a courtroom drama, smirking while reading us violations in a voice that sounded like she had practiced saying violation in the mirror. People nodded along like bobbleheads, and I told them calmly we followed city code and the ADA protects accessibility modifications. Clipboard Lady said, the ADA is federal. We are a private covenant. She said it like a gotcha, and I said, well, the ADA still applies. But she said, not to aesthetics. I wish I was making this up. We kept pushing back, but it got worse. She started filing noise complaints every time my kid rolled down the ramp. I know because she emailed them to me with timestamps 1 at 3:12 p.m. The noise was my kid's joyful yell because she finally made it down the ramp without any help. Clipboard lady typed it like a police report and said, "Resident created noise disturbance by yelling woohoo." I printed that one and stuck it to the fridge. My kid laughed every time she got juice. The real escalation came fast. We got a certified letter. The board had voted that our ramp violated aesthetic guidelines and had to be removed within 30 days. And by the way guys, why does no one send a certified letter to the HOA saying they violate moral guidelines? That would be appropriate if you ask me. Anyway, if you enjoyed the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and leave me a comment because that would be very much appreciated. Anyway, else they said we would be fined $500 per day. The vote was unanimous, so I looked up the board. Clipboard lady was president and the vice president was her sister. The treasurer was her sister's boyfriend, the secretary was a guy who worked at a gym and flexed in every photo with his own face, real checks and balances. We showed them the ADA language about HOAs having to make reasonable accommodations, and Clipboard lady waved the bylaws like a holy book and said, "Our guidelines are clear." She gave me a smirk that said, "Pay up." I then called a lawyer. The lawyer said exactly what you're thinking. They cannot do that, but he also said, "It'll be a fight." I thought maybe they were bluffing, but they weren't. They bulldozed our ramp. Yep, we had a follow-up neurology appointment that day. We left early and came home to yellow tape across our driveway, bulldozer prints in the front yard, and a gash of dirt where the ramp used to be. They chewed through the concrete and the new landing. One of the handrails was twisted like a pretzel in the flower bed, and the front door was now unreachable. I stood there holding my kid's backpack while she stared at the house like someone had erased a part of her life. Clipboard lady was on her porch with her dog sipping something. She had her phone out and started recording us like she caught us in a crime. I walked over and asked what happened. And she said, "Enforcement of bylaws." She said it like she wasn't 2 seconds from meeting a lawsuit. I asked where she got the authority to demolish property I own, and she said the board voted. I asked who did the demolition and she said she contracted it. I asked for the permit. She said, "We don't need a city permit to remove non-compliant structures." I laughed. I couldn't help it. My kid was shaking in her chair, so I kept it short. We took photos of everything. We called the police for a report, because even if it's actually a civil matter, you still want a record. The officer was polite and didn't try to mediate. He took notes, looked at the ground, looked at the handrail, and looked at my kid. He wrote quietly and told me to talk to a lawyer. I was already texting him though. We slept at a friend's place that night and it took 2 grown adults to lift my kid up our front steps the next day with a temporary ramp plank the contractor loaned us. She cried, not loud, just a steady stream while staring down where the ramp used to be. I wanted to dig a hole and scream into it, but instead I bought a cheap door camera and pointed it at Clipboard's porch. So here's what we could do or could have done. There's the obvious legal route, the ADA, damages, replacements and fees and so on, but suing an HOA is like stepping into a sludge pit. You get covered and it takes forever. Instead, I did 2 things at once. The official line with a lawyer and the pettier line where I treat the HOA like a weak fence and look for rotten posts. Step 1 is documents. I asked the HOA for the official vote records about the ramp, the notices, the bylaws, and anything showing board member terms. They have to keep minutes and financials. Clipboard lady sent me PDFs that looked like they were made in Microsoft Word at 2 in the morning. The so-called unanimous vote had names but no signatures. Step 2, talk to neighbors without making enemies. Most of them hate the drama, but people like to share if they think you're reasonable and not trying to rope them into a fight. One neighbor said the HOA dues had gone up twice since Clipboard moved in, but the community pool had a broken pump, the park lights were dead, and the mulch project never happened. He said he heard that they paid a consulting fee to the president for planning so-called improvements. Another neighbor mentioned that she got a violation for a garden gnome, but the treasurer had a 10-foot inflatable Santa on his roof for a week, and it's always the good old rules for thee. Step 3, public records. The contractor who built the ramp gave me a clean hands list of their permits. Easy, I pulled the permit for the ramp, it was all good. I pulled the permit for demolition on my address, but there was nothing. It didn't exist. Okay, then I checked the HOA registration with the state. A buddy of mine told me how on a group chat to go to the Secretary of the State's website, search the HOA name, see the filings. Guess what wasn't there? An active registration. The last filing was years ago under a different president and nobody filed annual reports since. Legally, they were a dead fish trying to swim. Clipboard Lady had taken over a ghost association and started making it bark. Step 4. Follow the money. I asked for financials, dues in, expenses out, but they stalled. I sent a certified letter citing the part of their own bylaws that says members can inspect records, and they sent me an Excel spreadsheet that would make a CFO weep. Expenses for landscaping consulting, security, admin fees, community outreach, no vendor names, no receipts, no contracts. The landscaping consulting checks were round numbers. One of them matched a payment I saw in a Venmo post where Clipboard Lady bragged about Kitchen Refresh Day in a photo with shiplap. The caption had a hammer emoji and confetti. I took screenshots of it and said on them, Step 5. Who tore up my yard? Well, the demolition company sticker was stuck on the side of the torn rail. Clipboard Lady hadn't thought to peel it off. I called the number and asked if they had a permit for residential demolition at my address, and the guy on the phone went cold. He asked who I was, and I said I was the homeowner. He said, we did a small concrete removal per a contract signed by a HOA name person. Then the president approved it. I asked who the president was and he read out Clipboard Lady's name. Then he said, look, we assumed they had the authority. I didn't yell at him, I just asked if he could email me the contract and he said he could not, client privacy, so I subpoenaed it later through my lawyer. But his admission was enough for my notes. Meanwhile, Clipboard Lady kept acting like the villain in a community theater version of a courtroom drama. She sent us a final notice saying that fines were accruing. We put the paper face down in the recycle bin and kept documenting. My lawyer sent them a demand letter to preserve evidence, stop contact with my kid and not tamper with our property. The board got spooked and started CCing the entire email chain, including the sister and gym guy. That was gold. People say dumb stuff on email when they think it's private. They talk about making an example so people keep their unsightly trash bins and ramps out of view. There it was, the quiet part. We filed a complaint with the city regarding unpermitted demolition. An inspector came out, saw the mess, shook his head, wrote a stop work order and said fines were possible. He took photos, I gave him coffee, and he told me to keep receipts for everything. Clipboard Lady filmed him from her porch and posted on the neighborhood Facebook group about so-called harassment, and then came the board meeting where everything snapped. I went because, why not? Clipboard Lady did a whole speech about fairness and uniform standards and how some people think they're above the rules. Then she waved a piece of paper and said, as you know, the board voted unanimously to enforce removal of unapproved structures. She tapped the paper like it owed her rent. I raised my hand and then just stood up and talked because she did not see my hand. I said I had the city permit, inspection and ADA guidance, I had copies, I handed them out, and I asked if they had the HOA state registration handy because I could not find an active one. The room went quiet in that way when someone accidentally knocks over the cake and everyone pretends they didn't see. Clipboard Lady said, we are registered. I asked to see it and she said, it's in process. I said the state site says that they are inactive and have been for years. A guy in the back googled it and whispered to his wife. Then 3 more people did. Clipboard Lady was outraged. She said registration was just a formality and I said, cool, then show the form. I also asked to see the unanimous vote minutes. She flashed a piece of paper again and I asked why their vice president and treasurer had never signed it. She tried to pass to the next topic but the gym guy looked like a deer hearing a twig snap. He took a sip of water and said he assumed someone else handled signatures and I said, can we hear from the vice president? The sister cleared her throat and said, we can discuss that later. I said, did you hold a meeting by email and mark it unanimous without signatures? Clipboard Lady said, we follow procedure. And I said, which procedure? We are moving on, she said. Well, that is when I said that I had hired an attorney and would be filing suit because of violating ADA-related laws and for damages related to the illegal demolition of my property. Clipboard Lady said the HOA would countersue for unpaid fines. Someone in the back laughed and I added very calmly that I was also filing complaints with the state for operating an unregistered association with the city for unpermitted demolition. And with the bank they used for accounts because I had concerns about embezzlement. You could see Gym Guy's Adam's apple do a burpee, the sister clutched her clipboard like it was a life vest, and Clipboard Lady smiled that tight smile and said, this meeting is adjourned. But it wasn't. People mobbed me afterwards, not to fight me, but to whisper. She fined me for my mailbox. She told me my daughter's chalk drawings were graffiti. She threatened to put a lien on my house. People were tired. They just didn't know what to do. So I told them what I was doing. I was gonna burn this little cardboard castle to the ground with paperwork, and they were welcome to join me. My lawyer filed the ADA complaint for me. He sent the demolition company a preservation letter. Meanwhile, I kept poking around where I was allowed. The State Consumer Protection Office has a simple form for homeowner association complaints. I filled it out with dates, names, and screenshots. I even included failed registrations, the bogus minutes, and an itemized list of our damages: smashed ramp, broken concrete, temporary access costs, my kids' loss of access, my time, and our stress. Then my neighbors started emailing me copies of their violation letters, and the letter had changed phones mid-paragraph, fines were not consistent, there were administrative fees that had no basis in the bylaws. And then the first domino fell. The city cited the HOA for performing unpermitted demolition. They fined the HOA. Clipboard Lady appealed and lost. The city's letter said the responsible party was the HOA president who authorized the work. Clipboard Lady posted a rant about government overreach. The comments were not kind. Then we got discovery from the demolition company. Their owner wasn't thrilled, but he complied. He sent a contract signed by Clipboard Lady as HOA president, and the contract described removal of unapproved ramp structure. He attached their invoice and the cancelled check, and the check was drawn on the HOA's account. The memo line said ramp compliance. The payment was a round number that matched one of the landscaping consulting expenses on the fake-looking spreadsheet. I don't even play gotcha as a sport, but I wanted to frame that check image like a diploma. My lawyer sent a second demand letter with the new evidence, and Clipboard Lady doubled down. She said they'd proudly defend the community guidelines. She CC'd 50 people. I'm not kidding, 50. I think she thought that public shaming would make us back off. All it did was give me more names for witnesses. Around that time, a neighbor who had been quiet stopped by with an envelope. I'll call him backyard guy. He handed me some files and said, "She doesn't know these exist, but I do." They were emails printed from an old HOA account from before Clipboard Lady took over. They showed the last legitimate president asking for volunteers to run the board because she was moving. Nobody stepped up. The bank account renewal got missed and the registration lapsed. The board died, and then Clipboard Lady moved in and revived it by printing new bylaws that gave the president the power to approve fines unilaterally. She didn't actually register with the state, she just played president of a club she invented. My lawyer made a sound on the phone I'd never heard him make. It was like a laugh and a calf had a baby. We updated the complaint to include the HOA not being a functioning legal entity. That meant all her fines and threats were just letters with fancy letterhead. That also meant that the bank was holding funds for an entity that legally didn't exist. Banks don't like that. The bank did freeze the account. You know how I found out? Clipboard Lady posted on the neighborhood page that certain hostile members had caused the community funds to be illegally frozen and that services may be interrupted. Someone asked what services. Someone else asked why she had spent thousands on consulting when the park lights didn't even work. A third person posted a photo of their cancelled check next to a screenshot of her kitchen refresh story. The comments turned into a riot. Clipboard Lady turned off comments and then deleted the post and then posted again saying, "Defamation is a serious crime." Absolutely no one was intimidated. At this point, I'll be honest, revenge was running itself. I just had to show up and be patient. The state sent a formal notice that the HOA was operating without proper registration and had 30 days to comply or cease operations. That means no fines, no enforcement, and no dues collection. Clipboard Lady tried to file the registration, but the state office, bless whoever sits at this desk, flagged it for review because of the complaints and because she couldn't show proper board elections or financial records. They needed minutes, they needed signatures, but she instead had Word documents with her own name on them and some copy-paste bylaws. The state asked questions and she had bad answers. Meanwhile, our ADA complaint got traction. It took a few more weeks and then everything hit at once. The state denied the HOA's attempt to re-register because of non-compliance and unresolved complaints, and they sent a letter essentially saying, "You are done." That meant the association as a legal entity was dissolved. The declaration that runs with the land still exists, but without a registered entity to administer it, there's no one to collect dues, enforce rules, or hold bank accounts. The homeowners collectively would have to either start a new association the right way or let it go dark. And yes, most people chose Let It Go Dark. Our ADA suit settled as well. The HOA agreed to pay damages and rebuild the ramp better than before. The demolition company kicked in a chunk because they should have checked permits. Clipboard Lady had to pay personally too because she acted outside any legitimate authority. Our lawyers' fees were covered. The settlement wasn't life-changing money, but it covered a new ramp with a smooth landing, an automatic door, and even a small exterior lift we hadn't budgeted for initially. Clipboard lady lost her position, obviously, sold her house in a hurry, and then moved. The association was done, no more dues, no more violation letters. I won. And yeah guys, don't you just love to see when an HOA gets their just desserts? Either way, the next one is a Prorevenge story that is titled "Young Firefighter Disrespects Lieutenant, so I shame him and get him to quit." So I got revenge on a douchebag I used to volunteer firefight with. This was in the early/mid 2000s, and I decided to go the local fire department as a volunteer firefighter. I did it for about 5 years and it was great. Training consisted of 3 months of fire training, 2 nights a week and all day Saturday, and then you would go to EMT training, another 3 months of training, and it was about a year, and then I was asked to help train some new recruits. One of the lieutenants, Amy, was a short middle-aged woman who was so full of fire she could make a grown man cry. One of those people who commands both fear and respect wherever she went. Honestly, a great lieutenant and great person. When she wasn't being a drill sergeant, she was extremely kind and generous. She'd often bake people cakes and treats and deliver them to the various stations in our department. However, in this new academy class that I was asked to help with, there was a cocky kid that we'll call Aaron. Aaron talked big during the training and acted like he was the all-American hero, like he was gonna be the lead badass in Backdraft 2. He performed moderately well in training, but far from the top of class. He gets assigned to Amy's station, which is a pretty quiet station in the department, and a few months after he starts, Amy swings by my station one night to say hi. She brings us the motherload cake from Claim Jumper, a massive 6-layer cake, and she explained that she had treated her crew to a night out at Claim Jumper, which must have cost a ton of money. I think she took out about 8 people and bought a whole cake to top it all off, and they had eaten the first 2 layers, so she gave us the remaining 4. We thanked her profusely and she left. Back then the big social media platform was MySpace, and I decided to look up some of the people in the department to make friends. I came across Aaron's page and I noticed some photos of him and the rest of his crew at Claim Jumper with Amy. However, when I read the comments, he bragged about how he had purposefully ordered the most expensive dinner, appetizers and drinks since Amy was buying. Then he bragged about how he was gonna take advantage of her stupidity. This alone pissed me off because she was doing this super nice and generous gesture. What an ungrateful, selfish idiot. Then I read the rest of his profile and he had videos and memes on his page glorifying himself as a badass firefighter, bragging about running into burning buildings and how he was such a hero. He was flirting with girls, blatantly trying to impress them with how brave he is. Bear in mind, he just graduated from the academy 3 months prior and had not even gone to EMT school. He had never been to a house fire, and all he basically did was carry gear for the other fully qualified firefighters. It was too much for me to tolerate, so here's the revenge. I printed off copies of his MySpace page, including his comments about Amy and toxic bragging. I made multiple copies and took them to every station in the department. We all had pagers, god I'm old, and a small keyboard at each station to send out text messages. I made an anonymous all-staff page to everyone in the department. I had to keep it brief since I couldn't fit a ton of characters, but I sent out his MySpace info and told everyone about how he treated Amy. Within an hour, Aaron had cleared out his MySpace page of all posts, photos, etc., and a couple of days later he deleted his account. It's a good thing I made so many copies. Immediately after this happened, he stopped coming to volunteer, and a few weeks later I heard that he quit. I later talked to Amy and admitted I was the one who sent the page. I told her I hated how he treated her, and she thanked me. She seemed really sad and hurt by what he had done, but being the tough short lady that she was, she quickly got back into being an actual badass firefighter. She later started dating and married a fire chief that also helped at the academy. I've lost touch with her, but I hope she did well. She seemed pretty happy last time I saw her. And the next one is a beautiful petty revenge story that is titled "I've been mailing my toenail clippings to my childhood bully once a month for 11 years. No return address, no note." So this is weird and I've never told anyone, but here we go. When I was in middle school, there was this kid, Marcus, who made my life miserable. Like not just regular bullying, but he was creative about it. So one time, he, for example, convinced half our grade that I pooped myself at a sleepover that I wasn't even at. Another time, he found out I had a crush on this girl, Emily, and he asked her out specifically to tell me about it in detail. Just cruel stuff like that constantly for over 3 years. Anyway though, fast forward to 2014, I'm now in college and I have not thought about this bully idiot in a while. I'm scrolling Facebook and I see his mom posted something about a garage sale and her address was right there in the post. I screenshotted it, don't know why, I just did. So that night, I'm clipping my toenails watching TV, and I look at the little pile and I look at my phone with the screenshot and I thought, what can I do with this? I put them in an envelope, no note, no return address, and I mailed it the next day. I felt stupid immediately after, figured that was it, got it out of my system, whatever. Well, a month later I'm clipping my toenails again and I just did it again. That was 11 years ago. I've not missed a single month. I've mailed them from different cities when I'm traveling for work. I don't even think about it that much anymore. It's just part of my routine now. First of the month, rent and toenails. And yeah guys, I gotta say, that is brilliant petty revenge, and screw that bully. Thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.